so much, Cindy. We've got Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki back on the line, the CEO of the Nepad agency. Dr. Mayaki, thank you so much for joining us. I understand that you are at the pre-DECA Financing Conference. What are you hoping to take away from that conference?
Well, as you know, Africa has designed a continental strategy for infrastructure development, that is PIDA, through an intense consultative process with regional economic communities, national governments, and the support of the African Development Bank, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and Nepad as the development agency of the AU. So we have a consensus on key priority programs in infrastructure, energy, transport, ICT, etc. This conference, this Dakar conference, will consist in creating a space for a dialogue between high-level political officials, I mean heads of states, and the private sector, the domestic private sector and the foreign private sector. But in order to make that conference a success, it will be extremely important that we bring to Dakar very specific projects which are owned and on which there is a consensus and a political ownership. We identified several criteria in order to target these projects. Now, in Lusaka, we are finalizing that list of projects that will enable us to ensure that a successful dialogue can take place and concrete commitments can be made. It's not a pledging conference. It is a conference of bringing political maturity on the one side and specific technically designed projects on the other hand.
Dr. Mayaki, can you give us an indication of the criteria that you've used to select these projects, and what are some of these low-hanging opportunities that you are grabbing?
Okay, we are talking about regional projects, which means that these projects have a transnational dimension. So the first criteria is really a strong political buy-in. The second criteria is an interest. These projects must interest the private sector, because the issue there in PIDA's implementation is to foster instruments like PPP. So the private sector interest has to be a key criteria. The third criteria is the regional balance between the different regions of a continent. And the fourth criteria is the sectoral balance, so that we do not go to Dakar with 90% of projects concentrated in transport, but with an equilibrium between transport, energy, ICT. So these are the criteria that we chose.
Dr. Mayaki?
Now, in order to yes?
Dr. Mayaki, of course, because we're running out of time, I just want to throw a question around. How are you planning to package these multi-country projects so that they have the attractiveness that you desire for the private sector? Because understanding that it becomes significantly more risky and perhaps even harder to take on multi-country projects.
Absolutely. We have had a very strong cooperation with a business working group of a World Economic Forum, a business working group on infrastructure. Within that business working group, we have about 35 stakeholders, and the majority of them are global players of the private sector. So we put these projects through the lens of that business working group. On the other hand, we are working very closely with a consultancy firm which is named Orecon. And Orecon has provided very specific and detailed fiches on each of the projects. So now we have a basket of about 16 projects which could be considered as low-hanging fruit with a sound basis, bankable, and the dialogue will take place on that list.